Good afternoon. I call to order the December 16th, 2024 regular meeting of the Minneapolis Heritage Preservation Commission. For the record, my name is Marie Bjornberg and I serve as chair of the commission. Just a reminder to silence your cell phones and other electronic devices and to speak clearly into the microphone when speaking at the dais or giving testimony. Would the clerk please call the roll so that we may verify the presence of a quorum?
Commissioner Booty.
Present.
Hare.
Present.
Howard.
Present.
Corrado is absent. Melblom is absent. Merrill.
Present.
Maston.
Present.
Vice Chair Sandbolt is absent. Chair Bjornberg.
Present.
There are 6 members present.
Let the record reflect that we do have a quorum and that Commissioners Melblom and Sandbolt provided proper notice that they have a conflict this afternoon and their absence is excused. Our first order of business is to adopt the agenda for this meeting. We will work from the agendas that are available by the clerk. I will go through the agenda and sort out which items will be discussed and which items will be put on the consent agenda to be approved as recommended by staff and without further discussion. Item number 4 is 101 3rd Avenue South, Ward 3. This application is for a certificate of appropriateness and will be discussed. Item number 5 is 143 19th Street East, Ward 6. This application is for a historic variance. Item number 5 will be on consent unless someone wants to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation. Item number 6 is 3120 Washburn Avenue North, Ward 4. This application is for a demolition of historic resource and will be discussed. Item number 7 is 2100 Stevens Avenue, Ward 10. This application is for a certificate of appropriateness and will be discussed. So the proposed agenda is, the consent agenda will include item number 5, 143 19th Street East, Ward 6. Is there any opposition from commissioners to the staff recommendations for this item? Is there anyone in the public that wishes to speak in opposition to that item? Hearing no opposition to placing that item on consent, we will approve the consent items in one motion at the start of the meeting. The following items will have staff presentation, public comment, and commission discussion and action. Item number 4, 101 3rd Avenue South, Ward 3. Item number 6, 3120 Washburn Avenue North, Ward 6. And item number 7, 2100 Stevens Avenue, Ward 10. Commissioners, may I have a motion to approve the proposed agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Howard. Is there a second?
Maston seconds.
Thank you, Commissioner Maston. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? The agenda is approved. Our next order of business will be to approve the minutes from our November 14th, 2024 and November 19th, 2024 meetings. May I have a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Booty. Is there a second?
Howard seconds.
Thank you, Commissioner Howard. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Any abstentions, including any commissioners who were absent?
Commissioner Maston abstains from November 19th.
Thank you, Commissioner Maston. The minutes are approved. Before I open the hearing to public comments, let me summarize the process for conducting the public hearing. First, we will act on the consent agenda we just set. Once items on the consent agenda are approved, the commission is done with those items and applicants may contact the planning staff tomorrow about next steps. After the consent agenda items are approved, we will take each remaining agenda item in order. Planning staff will present its report and commissioners may ask questions of staff. Then I will open the public hearing and we will hear from the applicant and commissioners may ask questions of the applicant. After that, we will invite public comment. If you wish to speak, we need you to do 2 things. Please be sure to sign up on the sheet over by the clerk. If you haven't done this already, you can do so afterwards. When you come up to testify, you must state your name and address for the record, and please keep your comments specific to the application before us today. If we have a lot of people, I may limit comments to 2 minutes and ask that you focus on new information not already presented. If you have materials to hand out, please give them to our committee clerk so they can be distributed to the commission and entered into the record. After public comments are complete, I will close the hearing and commissioners will deliberate and act on the applications before us. I will now open the public hearing on the consent agenda item, which is item number 5, 143 19th Street East, Ward 6. Again, do commissioners oppose the staff recommendation for this item? Are there any members of the public who oppose the staff recommendation for this item? Seeing none, I will now close the public hearing on the consent agenda. May I have a motion to approve staff findings and recommendations?
Maston so moves.
Thank you, Commissioner Maston. Is there a second?
Booty seconds.
Thank you, Commissioner Booty. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? These items are approved as recommended by staff on the agenda. Applicants may contact planning staff about next steps. Okay, our next item is item number 4, 101 3rd Avenue South, Ward 3. This application is for a certificate of appropriateness, and the staff report is presented by Rob Skalecki.
Thank you, Chair Bjornberg, and good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Rob Skalecki, Senior City Planner in the Historic Preservation section of the Planning Division. Today I'm presenting a Certificate of Appropriateness for 101 3rd Avenue South. This was continued from the last meeting, as you may recall, on November 19th. The subject building is the Hall and Dan Barrel Company building, currently known as the Barrel House. The property is a masonry commercial building that was completed in multiple phases for the Hall and Dan Company. In 1877, Albert R. Hall and Marcus C. Dan founded the Hall and Dan Barrel Company at 10th Avenue South on the Mississippi River to produce barrels for Minneapolis's growing flour mill industry. In 1880, the company moved to its current location on 3rd Avenue South, and they built a 3-story brick building at 109 to 115 3rd Avenue South. This section of the building had its height increased by 1 story in 1901 to make it 4 stories. In 1883, the factory complex was expanded with the addition of the second building at 101 to 107 3rd Avenue South. In 1896, a 4-story masonry addition was completed to connect the buildings, followed by another 1-story masonry addition in 1906 that filled the remaining space between the 1880 and 1884 buildings. In 1985, the building was altered for office space reuse. All of the windows were replaced at that time, and the 1896 and 1906 masonry infill additions that bridged the 2 sections of the building were demolished. A glass atrium entry bay was constructed between those 2 wings, which you can see in photos. And the property was likely fully repainted at that time as well in 1985, although there's evidence that it had been painted prior to that too. Nevertheless, the long-term paint on the building's brick exterior has definitely contributed to significant masonry deterioration over time. The applicant is proposing to complete a full masonry rehabilitation project at the property spread out over different permit phases, and the work includes the following. The applicant claims that the building's masonry is in poor condition, seemingly due to deferred routine maintenance over many decades. The property now requires extensive masonry repairs. Staff have reviewed and approved a certificate of no change to address the emergency removal of select loose masonry just about a month ago, and to mitigate any danger to any passing pedestrians that falling masonry of deteriorated brick may have. The applicant is proposing the following repairs and replacements at all elevations. Repointing of brick mortar joints. So the mortar joints are deteriorated, allowing moisture intrusion, and the applicant claims that extensive repointing is needed to prevent further damage. Drawings that were submitted suggest up to 100% repointing of the brick on all elevations could be completed. However, staff had initially been in discussion with the masonry contractor about that. I will note the applicant does have concerns about staff's first condition of approval for this project based on the repointing scope of work. Repointing of stone mortar joints is also proposed, and this is only spot repointing that's needed of the stone foundation to address deteriorated joints that's causing damage to this limestone foundation. The applicant had originally proposed nearly full repointing between 75 and 100%, but they've been able to reduce that scope of work to propose only replacing mortar on that stone foundation where deteriorated beyond repair. And just scrolling through here to see a few of the photos that the applicant submitted for documenting the deterioration that they see throughout the building. And there you can see on the left where select limestone foundation deterioration has been identified. The applicant is also proposing select brick replacement, and notes that there are deteriorated areas at all elevations, deteriorated mortar joints that have allowed for historic brick to become spalled in certain situations. The applicant is noting that brick will be retained where possible, where only severely damaged brick will be replaced in kind. The applicant's proposing a chimney reconstruction of one chimney on the flat roof that is in poor condition, that the applicant claims that bricks are falling off. They're falling into the flue, I should say. The applicant team has considered repointing and performing certain repairs on that select chimney, but ultimately has noted that that would not accomplish what is planned at the property for just repairs in general. So they are proposing to reconstruct one brick chimney. They're proposing stone patching and replacement, so deteriorated stone joints that have let moisture in. They're causing freeze-thaw damage, and patching will be done using yon mortar, and select proposed stones are going to be replaced that are deteriorated beyond repair. Lintel painting is also proposed, along with sheet metal sill flashing and concrete curb, part of the project scope, and staff have conditioned each of these items. The Department of Community Planning and Economic Development has analyzed the application to rehabilitate masonry on all elevations of the property located at 101 3rd Avenue South in the St. Anthony Falls Historic District based on the applicable findings for a certificate of appropriateness. Staff will focus on the findings under evaluating the project under the design guidelines for this district, as well as the Secretary of the Interior standards. As conditioned, staff finds that the alteration is consistent with the St. Anthony Falls Historic District design guidelines, which were adopted in 2012. A handful of sections apply, but staff did pick out materials and masonry as the ones that are most specific to the scope of work. The applicant had originally approached staff with rehabilitation work for the majority of the building. The proposed work will replace deteriorated mortar, stone, and brick that cannot be repaired in select areas. After discussion with the applicant, the staff did understand that the applicant was proposing to reduce their scope of work for brick repointing, so it wouldn't be up to 100% shown on all elevations that were submitted. Again, as staff noted previously, the applicant does have concerns about how that condition of approval, number one, is written to address that repointing scope of work for the brick. The applicant is planning to use in-kind materials to replace the select areas of brick and mortar that are deteriorated beyond repair. A mortar match was conducted and included that the historic mortar for stone and brick is closest to type O, which is consistent with what staff would recommend for conditions of approval on historic properties. Type O, therefore, will be used for repointing work at the property. As staff mentioned before, only select areas of stone will be patched with yon mortar, and repointing will take place at that stone foundation. Select stones will need to be replaced due to deterioration, and we can see some of that in the photo evidence. Staff also believes the alteration is consistent with the applicable applicable recommendations contained in the Secretary of the Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties, and staff did mark 2 specifically to evaluate the project under, and that is standard number 5 and standard number 6. So standard number 5 is distinctive materials, features, finishes, and construction techniques or examples of craftsmanship that characterize a property shall be preserved. And standard number 6, deteriorated historic features will be repaired rather than replaced. Where the severity of deterioration requires replacement of distinctive features, the new features will match the old in design, color, texture, and where possible, materials. So replacing of missing features will be substantiated and documented by physical evidence. So as conditioned by staff, the applicant's scope of masonry rehabilitation and repair work at the property is appropriate per the standards. So meeting standards 5 and 6, the applicant will undertake select mortar and brick removal where those features are deteriorated beyond repair. They will replace these features in kind with mortar and brick that matches the existing. The applicant will has tested the mortar and provided a match following their on-site evaluation. The brick will also be matched based on on-site analysis. The applicant notes that the concrete curb is part of the scope of work of their itemized work scope, but this was not clarified in their drawing, so this is one of the items that staff conditioned for approval, that the applicant be able to clarify this so staff can evaluate it to meet the Secretary of the Interior standards. With that, the Department of Community Planning and Economic Development recommends that the Heritage Preservation Commission adopt staff findings for the application by Jim Dolby of Innovative Masonry Restoration on behalf of Jeff Halverson, Barrel House LLC, for the property located at 101 3rd Avenue South in the St. Anthony Falls Historic District, and recommend that the Heritage Preservation Commission approves the certificate of appropriateness to rehabilitate masonry on all elevations of the property located at 101 3rd Avenue South in the St. Anthony Falls Historic District, based on the following conditions. And staff will note that in the agenda that was published online, the condition numbers were somehow deleted, so staff will note each number of each condition, but those should have been recorded in the previous agenda, so they should be public record, and they are, of course, in the staff report. The first condition that, as we mentioned previously, the applicant does have concerns with is that only deteriorated beyond repair brick, stone, and mortar shall be removed and replaced. The applicant shall work with staff to determine the final scope of work once further on-site assessments are made as part of the permitting process. The second condition of approval is that mortar and brick matches shall be submitted to staff for review and approval prior to the permit being issued. The third condition of approval is that the applicant shall submit elevation drawings of the new chimney for staff to review and approve. The fourth condition is that new metal sill flashing shall not cover historic brick sills, and that final plans for metal sill flashing shall be submitted to staff for review and approval. The fifth condition of approval is that only type O mortar shall be used for select repointing. And the sixth condition of approval is that the final proposed scope of concrete curb construction shall be submitted to staff for review. And I'm available as staff for any questions, but as I've noted, the applicant is here and would like to speak as well. And I do have a handful of drawings here showing the scope of work that we mentioned, and of course were submitted in the staff report, or submitted for staff evaluation. I have those here in the slides if we need to slide and go through them. So thank you.
Thank you for that report, and please let the record reflect that Commissioner Corrado has arrived. Commissioners, are there questions for staff? I guess I have one question. So you mentioned that the applicant has a concern with the first condition. Is that specifically related to the mortar scope or all three components of that?
Chair Bjornberg, thank you for that question. It's my understanding that this is specific to the extent of work proposed. So in staff report and in our discussions with the applicant, there was an understanding that 75% to 100% repointing that's shown on the plans could be scaled down, and that was at the time that staff was writing the staff report. So because of that, that was our understanding in writing that. In further evaluation, and I don't want to speak too much for the applicant, but it's my understanding that their team realized that the deterioration is so bad in some situations where it may actually need 100% repointing. So the applicant is concerned that if they submit to staff a scope of 100% repointing, it's not something that staff would necessarily be able to approve, just because that scope of mortar removal and mortar replacement generally isn't considered appropriate per the Secretary of the Interior standards. It is in select instances, but it's often a very severe scope of deterioration that would need to be proven to be able to allow for that. So without that, I will let the applicant kind of expand on that if I missed anything and give their point of view as well.
Thank you for that. And just so I'm understanding, the way that this is written is that they'll just have to work with you after further on-site assessments to define that final scope. So if they are able to prove deterioration, that is still able to get replaced.
Correct.
as written.
Correct. Yes, they would like to confirm that if needed, if they can show 100%, that they can receive approval for that scope of work at the time of permit submission.
Thank you. Commissioner Maston.
Thank you, Mr. Skolecki. I do have one question about the scope, and it's reported in our staff report that the 1980s is when you believe the paint was last applied, and maybe even prior to that it had happened as well. Is paint going to be part of this work scope? Are they repainting any of this?
Chair Bjornberg, Commissioner Maston, that is a good question. That is something that staff discussed with the applicant. It's my understanding that after they complete the work, they may just leave it as is. However, there have been times where staff has allowed to have that, repointed once the repointing has been done. Staff has allowed repainting in certain situations, like the subject property where paint is on the entirety of the building.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Do other commissioners have any questions for staff? Okay, thank you. I will now open the public hearing for this item, and I believe that the applicant is here and would like to speak. If you could please come to the microphone and state your name and address for the record.
Hi, I'm Jim Dolby with Innovative Mesa Restoration. I am the applicant. Thanks for letting me come today and present. Part of the project, I brought the project team with the designer who put together the scope for the project, and I'm going to turn it over to them. It's Building Consulting Group. Take the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. I'm Ryan Riley with Buildings Consulting Group. I'm the engineer of record for the design of the repairs.
I'm Morgan Fritz, the project engineer for the design of the repairs.
Can we plug in slide into, if we have thumb drive? Is that?
I believe so.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so as already stated, I'm Morgan Fritz with Buildings Consulting Group, the engineering firm on this project. And this is Ryan Riley, the engineer of record for the project. So, as kind of already explained before, the intent of our work is to preserve the barrel house at this address. We want to repoint the brick and stone masonry joints where it is deteriorated beyond repair. We essentially are just looking for a clarification of the significant reduction of work scope for this project, just making sure that we are all on the same page with how much work needs to be done. Our essential goal for the entire project is to protect the public health and preservation of this structure. We don't want anything falling in pedestrian walkways or anything like that. And we will be following the National Park Service as they define preservation in their systems. So we'll just walk through some of the elevations and where we've seen the deterioration up close and from a distance. So this is the east elevation. We can see the stone foundation wall on this elevation and then the brick masonry as well. Yep. So an up close look, that's kind of, we've already seen some of these pictures where there's deterioration of the stone, where we would need to replace some of the stone as it is essentially gone, and repointing of the mortar joints there. In some instances, we can see that stone has been replaced, and we do not have an intent to touch that stone as long as it is in good condition. Here we can see an up close of some of the repairs that are needed. We have a crack at an infill area that has happened. This was last week. As of last week, this crack is opened up. And we can see that from a distance and up close we can see it. Here's just closer looks at some of our brick deterioration and mortar joint deterioration on this elevation. Here we can see the south elevation, essentially the same thing that we're looking at. Some of the foundation wall does need to be repaired. Some of it has previously been repaired, and then the brick elevation as well. In this instance, we can see where a stone is completely missing, and we would like to repair that as well as some of the mortar joints. And then we can see here where there's an up close of where mortar joint does look okay and would look okay from a distance, but after further inspection, it is 100% deteriorated. This is the west elevation. We can kind of see the same things as we've been seeing on the other elevations where mortar joints are 100% deteriorated, and we have differing repair. Here we can see the north elevation, and we can see up close, if we go to the next slide, it's what we've been seeing on the other elevations. There's differing time frames of mortar joint repairs and differing deterioration. Here we can, here, I'll let Ryan take it.
Yeah, thanks, Morgan. So this is one example of an area where when we got up close to the building, there's areas that have been repointed in the past, probably right before the last painting was done. This is all the image of the same location. The far left, you can see there's some paint flaking and a little bit of mortar deterioration, but from even a few feet away, it looks like it's in good condition. But even just some very gentle inspection, just with a masonry hammer, just some light scraping, the paint easily scrapes away and the mortar starts to crumble. What we find is in some of the areas that have been repointed in the past, there's just a thin layer of repointing mortar that's been added over top of the existing deteriorated mortar. And then, kind of as Rob had mentioned, the paint has likely helped hold some moisture into the wall. So we have older deteriorated mortars that are in the wall, and then paint has kind of trapped some moisture in there. So there's a lot of freeze-thaw deterioration. So when that exterior hardened mortar gets flaked away, the mortar behind there is just crumbling and turning to sand in some areas. So this would be an example of where we thought maybe we could leave this mortar in place and not repoint 100%, but when we start chipping into these areas, we can tell the mortar behind the surface is deteriorated and reverting back to sand. Just another little area, there was a small paint chip very minor mortar deterioration found, but a little bit of selective scraping and the mortar just crumbles away. Well, this is video just showing some of the crumbling mortar. So in some instances, we were able to just easily scrape the mortar away, almost full depth of the brick. So very, very severe mortar deterioration. And those were in some areas where from even a few feet away, the mortar looked like it was in good condition. There's another example of some select exploration in the same spot as the mortar crumbled away. And just a few more pictures of brick deterioration. And the right picture is just an example of where there was existing mortar deterioration that was never repaired the last time the building was painted. So on the right half of the right picture, there's repointing mortar, and the left half, it was never repaired. So there's varying degrees of repair that have been done in the past, and we suspect that some of it wasn't done right the first time. So we want to get rid of that, those repairs that are not appropriate, and make sure that a building will function well. The last item we would like to have for consideration is we had specified to put a sheet metal sill covering over top of the horizontal brick masonry window sills. Our intent with what we want to do with that is to have a reversible repair that is non-permanent. We have areas, this is an example where a concrete mortar wash has been installed at some point in the past over top of the brick sill. And mortar and brick in a horizontal surface like this just doesn't last very long. When water penetrates into it, we get freeze-thaw deterioration, and we get some pretty significant deterioration. So what we would like to be able to do is cover these sills at this time with a repair that is fully reversible and not permanent. It would be a sheet metal cover that would slip underneath the windowsill, so we can get a good joint sealant to seal the window to the brick. And we would have sheet metal that would turn up the side of the brick and just turn into a mortar joint. So at some point in the future, when the owner has gotten enough funds to be able to fully restore the deteriorated sills, the sheet metal can be removed, the brick can be restored, and nothing will have been permanently changed. And that's the last item. Otherwise, I think what we would like to highlight, we are in, I think, general agreement with the staff's conditional approval. We just really want confirmation that we'll be able to do the necessary repairs to the building. So I guess if there's any questions, we'll happily answer them.
Thank you for those comments. Commissioners, are there questions for the applicant? I have a few questions. So the last thing that you talked about was that metal sill flashing proposal.
Yes.
And one of the conditions in here is about how much that's covering. Is that also a condition that you have disagreements with, or?
Yes, sorry, that condition, we would like, I guess, yeah, we disagree with that condition, and we would like the ability to cover the sills with a non-permanent removable protection that will preserve the building. At this point, the owner doesn't really have the funds to do a full restoration of all the sills. There's falling hazards. The bricks have spalled and cracked and deteriorated. We've removed some of those in the last couple of weeks when Innovative Masonry was out with a aerial lift. So we can remove falling hazards to protect the public, but there's still a lot of deterioration that the owner really doesn't have funds to fully restore all of them at this time. So what we would like is just a temporary cover that, like I said, is non-permanent and will provide some protection.
So the brick sills repair work to them are not part of this, and you're just proposing to put the flashing over it?
There would be some isolated repair in the worst areas. Where the mortar joints are completely gone, we would repoint that mortar. If brick are completely missing or severely deteriorated, we would need to infill that, and we would repair those with appropriate materials at this time.
Commissioner Maston?
Looking at the photo you have on the screen right now, it almost looks like there's an existing parge coat over
Yes.
the bricks. So-
Yeah, in general, all of the horizontal brick sills have a parge coat or a concrete wash that slopes to the exterior. It's maybe from a half inch to an inch thick to a couple of inches thick, maybe. In a lot of those cases, those are severely deteriorated and at risk of falling. So this is a picture of them being removed because they were just kind of sitting there on the sill.
Thank you.
Did you consider replacing with just another parge coat on top of those?
That is an option. We don't really consider that a long-term repair. It still allows water to come in. It cracks very easily. Just a parge coat really doesn't have any reinforcement. Concrete cracks. It's kind of what it does, and it's hard to seal. It will allow water to penetrate pretty readily and will be in poor shape and present a falling hazard, in my opinion, in a few years, potentially.
I'm sorry, I'm jumping around on questions a bunch. So the concern that you guys had with the first condition was just confirmation that you guys are able to work with staff to assess conditions on site and then finalize the scope based on approval.
Yes. Yeah, I think one of the staff comments initially was the idea of a significant reduction in work scope. We just wanted to make sure there were no miscommunications with, our intent is to repair what needs to be repaired following the preservation guidelines.
One additional question.
Yeah.
For bricks that need to get replaced, will those get painted? There was the question about painting.
Oh, yes, I had meant to bring that up with painting. As of right now, we've discussed with the owner, their initial intent is to not do any additional painting when the repairs are done. We feel once the mortar joints are repointed, the building will breathe better and it'll perform better without paint over the mortar joints, and it'll help prevent additional brick masonry unit spalling and deterioration in the future. But yeah, as of right now, the intent would be to not paint any of the repairs that are done.
Okay, thank you. Do commissioners have other questions? Commissioner Corrado.
More on the limestone at the base of the building. That looks fairly consistent along a sidewalk. My guess is that's probably snow and salt. Is there anything during the repairs that might help prevent future deterioration of that condition, or are we leaving that to the owner?
There are various sealers and protectants or consolidants that can be added. As of right now, it's not part of the work scope. That would be something possibly in a future repair program. The owners are interested in getting everything, taking care of the deferred maintenance over the decades and make sure that the building is structurally sound and in good shape.
Sir, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Are there any members of the public who wish to speak for or against this item? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing on this. Commissioners, let's discuss. Are there any concerns or comments on the application? Commissioner Hare.
Regarding point number 4, with the metal sill flashing not to cover historic brick sills, I also share staff's concern that that may alter the integrity or the look of the building, and for an unknown duration that those metal flashing sills may be in place. I would encourage repair of the sills to be completed without the aluminum flashing covers.
Thank you. Other comments from commissioners? I'll say I'm a little bit divided on the sill flashing myself. I do think that sort of like repairing the brick underneath should be a priority, especially within a masonry project that is looking at a large scope. I can see why they are looking at that metal flashing to try to move that water away. And I do appreciate that the condition as written still gives a little bit of flexibility to work with staff to sort of figure out what within that sort of will work, right? Is there an option to not necessarily cover all the brick, but still be moving water away? Commissioner Corrado.
I guess going back to the whole question of painting, not painting, I guess it appears that the majority of the masonry is potentially now sand and needs to get replaced and repointed. And at that point, I guess my concern is if the color's different, the building's character significantly changes. So I guess that would be a question. It really does feel like the paint's holding everything together, so I hope that that's not the future condition, because you don't want to repeat it, whether it's 10, 20 years from now, have the same issue. So I guess that's my concern. Similar concern, I guess, with the metal flashing. I'm sympathetic. These things get really expensive. It's nice to have a temporary solution, but temporary solutions can often become permanent ones, and so how that gets addressed will be a key point. But to have that flexibility in the conditions is really good.
Other comments from commissioners? Commissioner Howard.
I'm torn on the metal sill flashing. I'm still thinking on that one. Number one, I do believe that the way it's written, it gives you the flexibility as long as you can show that it's deteriorated beyond repair, that you should be able to do what you need to do. It's pretty obvious to me, knowing this building and seeing the pictures now. So looking at it really close up, it needs a lot of work in the mortar. And I think that the way it's written is, I feel comfortable that it gives you what you need to do, what you need to do. So I'm not as concerned about that one.
Thank you, Commissioner Howard. Yeah, I will agree. I also feel like we have seen good evidence that there is a need for mortar replacement there. So I think that the way that is written and the work that they have done to sort of show that deterioration makes me feel confident that they'll be able to work with staff to a mutually agreeable scope there. Commissioner Howard.
Still cogitating on number 4. I'm not an architect and don't play one on TV. Is there a way to do, I'm not looking at all the other folks here who are architects and do details all the time. I haven't done them for 30 years. Is there a way to get the metal just on the top of the brick, that it's not coming down the front? Is that what you're thinking when you're looking at that detail? I'm concerned that if the metal isn't there and if the parge coat isn't there, it's just going to continue to deteriorate. I know enough to be dangerous to know that can happen, but I'd ask the architects who are more into doing these details than I am.
Commissioner Maston.
One option would be sealant joints in all your sky-facing mortar. So you have a little bit better protection. It's not as long-lasting as a mortar, but it definitely looks more like authentic and real than covering it with metal.
Commissioner Hare.
Thank you, Chair Bjornberg. Yes, I would agree with Commissioner Maston that there are other potentially more historically accurate or look-wise to repair the sills, and if the flashing was just to cover the top of the brick, in the instances that the brick has completely spalled or deteriorated, I assume that brick would be repaired or replaced before the metal flashing would be applied to the top, and then it would be good to see a tiny drip edge on the to relieve the capillary action of the water as it's dripping off of the sill. One question or concern I had as well that mirrors Commissioner Corrado's is that if most of the mortar would be replaced, is it being replaced with color matched mortar to the existing brick, or is it to be standard mortar color?
Thank you, Commissioner Hare. I had a very similar question, and similarly with the brick replacements, like are there, I don't know what the brick color is. I don't have a good answer for it, especially because paint isn't part of the scope. But it is a good thing to think about that I also think, condition number 2 in here is that mortar and brick matches shall be submitted to staff for review. So again, I think that staff did a good job of sort of writing conditions that would hopefully predict the concerns that we would have. Any other comments from commissioners? Commissioner Corrado.
Going back to the sill thing. I am concerned that the brick, as noted in the report, is considered to be a soft brick. And so even if we did seal the joints, I'm afraid the brick itself would still deteriorate if it wasn't protected. And while I suppose you could try to seal the brick, and that's a shorter term solution similar to the sill, cost and effectiveness, I do think being able to consider some type of a metal flashing or a solid surface is potentially going to protect the sill and the brick underneath better, which ultimately is better and more protective of the entire building. You still do need a drip edge, which does create a shadow line, but anyway.
Thank you. Other comments from commissioners? Thoughts on conditions? Commissioner Booty.
Thank you, Chair Bjornberg. I generally agree with the conditions as staff has written them. I wonder if other commissioners have thoughts about how we might edit number 4. If there's language that we might add, I'll look at the architects again to the cover, maybe like a specific side of the brick, and say like, whatever the street-facing part of the sill, maybe we prevent that from being covered, but leave it open for interpretation for staff to review and approve any future plans that the applicant might come up with for those sills.
Thank you for that comment. Yeah, I agree. I'm also trying to think about and interpret how condition number 4 would be applied, and if the way that it's written would allow for sort of what we are talking about. And I think it's similar to what was shown in the drawings of just covering that sort of, the part that we saw, and then leaving the front. Commissioner Corrado.
Is it adding something similar to condition 1, where it's the applicant shall work with staff to determine the final scope of work once final on-site assessments are made as part of the permitting process?
So,
Because it's a sill-by-sill cases, I would imagine.
but it says final plans for metal sill flashing shall be submitted to staff for review and approval. So I think that's where I'm like, I feel like it's sort of already reflected that way.
Yeah.
It's just the first statement that has me, does there need to be a modifier of shall not cover all historic brick, or, that's where I'm struggling.
Yeah, we need something that says you have to prove that it's necessary. There are no other viable alternates. Sorry, I'm trying to think of a wording.
Commissioner Merrill?
It seems to me that final plans for metal sill flashing shall be submitted to staff for review and approval. I think that covers it. It covers it for me.
Thank you.
Does it make sense to strike the first sentence?
Do commissioners have thoughts on that proposal? Commissioner Booty?
I feel fine about striking the first sentence. I think that's where I'm getting hung up too, but having the final plans being approved feels comfortable for me too.
Do other commissioners have thoughts on that? Commissioner Maston?
I also feel comfortable striking the first sentence of condition 4.
Commissioner Booty?
I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve the certificate of appropriateness to rehabilitate masonry on all elevations of the property located at 101 3rd Avenue South in the St. Anthony Falls Historic District with all approved conditions except for editing condition number 4 to state final plans for metal sill flashing shall be submitted to staff for review and approval.
Thank you, Commissioner Booty. Is there a second?
Maston seconds.
Thank you, Commissioner Maston. Any other discussion? Commissioner Hare?
Would it be in the best interest to add to condition number 2 that specify what is being matched, whether it is the original cream brick, the original Chaska brick, and mortar? Is it the original mortar color, or is it to match the building in its current appearance?
I personally would love to leave that up to staff. Commissioner Howard?
Yeah, I feel the way it's written now is adequate, and let the staff work through that. I would not want to be trying to match the paint color. So yeah, I like it the way it's written.
Any other discussion? Would the clerk please call a roll?
Commissioner Booty,
Aye.
Hare,
Aye.
Howard,
Aye.
Corrado,
Aye.
Maston,
Aye.
Merrill,
Aye.
Chair Bjornberg.
Aye.
There are 7 ayes.
Thank you. That motion passes. Item number 6, 3120 Washburn Avenue North, Ward 4. This application is for a demolition of historic resource. The staff report is presented by Rob Skalecki.
Thank you, Chair Bjornberg, and good afternoon again, Commissioners. I'm Rob Skalecki, Senior City Planner in the Historic Preservation Section of the Planning Division. Today I'm presenting a demolition of historic resource application for 3120 Washburn Avenue North, originally known as the Pilgrim Heights Community Church. On October 14th, 2022, CPED staff determined the property located at 3120 Washburn Avenue North was a historic resource through a historic review letter. The letter concluded that the subject property appeared eligible for landmark designation under Criterion 4 for architecture as a characteristic example of a modern church designed in the modern Gothic or A-frame subtype. The property also appeared eligible for designation under Criterion 6 as the work of master architects McHenry and Craft at that time that the historic review letter was written. The property was surveyed by the 106 Group in the 2012 Botno Transitway Route 2D inventory, and it was considered individually eligible for National Register of Historic Places listing at that time. The Minnesota State Historic Preservation Office confirmed that their records show that they concur with the determination that the church had been determined eligible as of July 7th, 2021. The subject property includes a brick and masonry church that was built in the modern style, including minimal ornamentation, a prominent front gable, A-frame form, and clear-story window bands below the eaves spanning both the north elevation, which is a primary elevation of the property. An enclosed gallery entry with prominent eaves and bracketed soffits extend much of the west, which is the front elevation, to link the church with the educational and community wing. The educational and community wing is at the south side of the building, and that was completed at the same time the church was constructed. Permit records do suggest that the foundation of the superstructure began construction in 1952. The building was completed in 1953. Pilgrim Congregational Church was established in 1873. In 1947, Pilgrim Congregational Church and Forest Heights Congregational Church merged to form Pilgrim Heights Community Church. The former congregation moved to the subject location from the previous Pilgrim Congregational Church building that was located at 14th and Lyndale Avenues North, where they had been since 1884. The success of the merger prompted the congregation to seek a more contemporary building on a more suitable location for their members. Part of the reason that Forest Heights Congregational Church committed to the merger was due to the understanding that this new church would be built in a more accessible location, and this is according to the project files that were accessed through the University of Minnesota's Northwest Architectural Archives. Early in 1952, the church did revise their plans to include a smaller and less expensive building that utilized much less steel. According to a November 28, 1953 Minneapolis Star article about the new church, the complex was built and furnished for a cost of $190,000. The property included a sanctuary that could sit about 400 people and classroom space for about 500 youth in 2 sessions. The church was dedicated on November 29th, 1953. The building's design was documented in a few early modern era sources that captured notable new construction. The building was featured in the November 22nd, 1953 Minneapolis Sunday Tribune article on modern church design in the metro area that was written by Robert Cerny. The article highlighted some of the most prominent recent modern church designs at that point, and inclusion in that church article is a noteworthy thing. The church was recorded in the 1955 book Twin Cities Architecture, Minneapolis and St. Paul from 1820 to 1955 by Harlan McClure, and McClure called out the design of this building for its limited budget design that included worship and education spaces for their suburban congregation. The Fremont Congregational Church and Pilgrim Heights merged in 1966 to become the Parkway United Church of Christ, per Star Tribune archive records. The subject property does appear to retain very good historic integrity. Permit records suggest that standard repairs and roof replacement had taken place at the property in the past. A few select wood and metal accents appear to have been changed or painted to the current dark gray color. But this has existed since at least 1999, per all photo evidence, newspaper archive evidence from the Star Tribune archives, Northwest Architectural Archive evidence, any historic photo evidence, as I noted, all point to the fact that the building does appear to retain very good historic integrity to its original design. The applicant is proposing to demolish the building at the parcel. The applicant team is proposing a multifamily dwelling at the parcel. The proposed new development is planning to utilize Housing and Urban Development HUD funds that will require the project to go through Section 106 environmental review. The applicant did contract local historical consultant Amy Lucas of Landscape Research LLC to compile a Section 106 related evaluation, and this is what was submitted in the materials for the HPC's evaluation. But staff would note that the submitted evaluation doesn't address the building's potential local historic significance. Staff did receive one public comment in email form today for the HPC to review and consider. The Department of Community Planning and Economic Development has analyzed the application to demolish the property at 3120 Washburn Avenue North, historically known as the Pilgrim Heights Community Church, based on the following findings. And the first is for significance. In CPED's review, the subject property does not appear eligible for local designation. In CPED's review, we previously did write a historic review letter, but we've received more information now through both our own research and what was compiled by the applicant and reviewing past sources. Previously, the church was identified as potentially eligible under Criterion 4 and Criterion 6, but in reevaluating those for Criterion 4, the property embodies the distinctive characteristics of an architectural or engineering type, style, or method of construction. The property does not appear eligible under Criterion 4 as a significant example of a church designed in the modern or modern Gothic style. While the building is one of the older examples of this type of building in the city, the property is not the best example of this specific, although popular, subtype of the era. As I mentioned, staff had previously evaluated the church, as well as a handful of modern era churches have come to staff's attention over the past decade. One of those was the Lake Harriet Christian Church, which is located at 5009 Beard Avenue South, and that was submitted as a demolition of historic resource application in 2022. This submission, the application for that and previous research that staff had did, compiled a few more examples of this church throughout the city. The previous determination and all sources that staff were able to rely on for research do note that this A-frame style church was already known and popular at the time of this church's construction. It was becoming increasingly more popular and really stood as one of the most popular church styles of this era, the modern era. With that as well, the design of the subject building alone is not enough of a distinction to suggest it possesses the required significance to be considered for landmark status. Staff did compile a list of other examples that are included in the staff report, and these are all very early examples. These are all extant churches, and these are just 6 examples, and there are many more that were built after this within the city limits. It is still a growing area of study that staff is looking into, as more projects like this come forward. But overall, staff believes that multiple examples of this very common church style still exist in Minneapolis. There's currently not enough evidence to suggest that the property is worthy of designation when compared to other examples that embody distinctive characteristics of this modern Gothic or A-frame church style. As such, CPED finds the property to be not eligible for landmark designation under Criterion 4. And under Criterion 6, for the property exemplifies works of master builders, engineers, designers, artists, craftsmen, or architects. The subject building was designed by McEnery & Craft, a firm recognized by CPED as master architects. The firm is perhaps best known in Minneapolis for their Farmers and Mechanics Savings Bank building that's located at 88 6th Street South, and that was completed in 2 phases of a 1942 construction and the 1963 office addition. That building is listed in the National Register of Historic Places, but it is not locally designated. And examples like this are among the best examples to show the firm's design expertise. McEnery & Craft completed many community-centered buildings in the Twin Cities. CPED has previously researched properties designed by them located at 1527 East Lake Street, First Bloomington National Bank, that was built in 1961, as well as 819 2nd Avenue South, which is the Mahala Fisk Pillsbury Club building, which was built in 1955. Currently available evidence suggests that the subject property is among the best examples of a church completed by the architects in Minneapolis. However, Evidence to suggest the firm's churches are emblematic of their work is still inconclusive. It is true that other currently known McHenry and Craft church designs in the state did follow the modern Gothic or A-frame gable roof trend. Some of these examples that are extant include Aldersgate Methodist Church in St. Louis Park, which was built in 1950 to 1951, and St. Luke's Episcopal Church in Rochester, which was built in 1961. Of all remaining McHenry and Craft design buildings in Minneapolis, the most notable do appear to be non-ecclesiastical. The extant Mahala Fisk Pillsbury Club building or Farmers Mechanics Bank building appear to be more in line with the residential or commercial type buildings that the firm would become known for designing. So upon further research, there's not enough evidence to show that the Pilgrim Heights Community Church exemplifies the work of McHenry and Craft, and CPED finds that the property is not eligible for landmark designation under criterion 6. As for historic integrity, CPED does believe that the property does retain historic integrity as previously noted, but it does not retain significance to be considered for landmark status. Under other findings required for demolition, there's the destruction is necessary to correct an unsafe or dangerous condition at the property. Staff does not believe that there is an unsafe or dangerous condition at the property. CPED finds that demolition would not be necessary to correct that, and the applicant has not demonstrated that there is this condition that exists at the property. For the second finding, that there are no reasonable alternatives to the destruction. In determining reasonable alternatives, the commission shall consider but not be limited to the significance of the property, the integrity of the property, and the economic value or usefulness of the existing structure, including its current use, cost of renovation, and feasible alternative uses. CPED finds that there are no reasonable alternatives to demolition. However, the building does not retain significance necessary to be considered for local landmark designation based on additional research done by staff and provided by the applicant. The property does not retain the significance to be considered for local landmark designation as expanded upon in staff's evaluation under 7 criteria, and therefore CPED finds the property not eligible for local landmark status. For integrity, again, the property does appear to retain historic integrity but does not retain significance. For economic value or usefulness of the structure, the applicant does state that there is no reasonable alternatives to this given the economic value and usefulness of the structure, but CPED does find that there are reasonable alternatives to demolition when considering that. Again, we do not find the property to be eligible for local designation for its significance. So the current use, the cost of use, and feasible alternative uses were not fully evaluated by the applicant and submitted for staff's evaluation. Staff has known multiple church properties in the city to have been reused successfully, so any claims that reuse of the church property would be cost prohibitive or not feasible were not supported by any relevant evidence for staff to be able to make the finding that this would be the case for the property. So with that, the findings, the subject property does not appear eligible for local designation as an individual landmark under any of the significance criteria in Chapter 599-210. The subject property retains all 7 aspects of integrity. No unsafe or dangerous conditions have been proven to exist at the property. There are reasonable alternatives to demolition considering the significance, integrity, and economic value or usefulness of the existing building. With that, the Department of Community Planning and Economic Development recommends that the Heritage Preservation Commission adopt staff findings for the demolition of historic resource application by Richard Hutzel on behalf of Parkway Housing Partners LLC for the property located at 3120 Washburn Avenue North, and recommend that the Heritage Preservation Commission approves the demolition of historic resource application. And with that, I'm available as staff for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you for that report. Commissioners, are there questions for staff? Commissioner Howard.
Thank you. I'm a little confused by the report that we got. It seems to me that landscape research did not reevaluate the building. They are just using the earlier evaluation. So it is still considered eligible under National Register Criterion C on the National Register side of things. Is that correct?
Chair Bjornberg, Commissioner Howard, that is correct.
Okay, so in our modernism context, we state that properties that meet National Register Criterion C will likely also be significant under local criterion 4. Are you making the argument that we should not be using that as a judgment?
Chair Bjornberg, Commissioner Howard, I don't believe so. I believe that additional staff research that was done on the property that surpasses the research that had been done to determine it eligible is what allowed staff to be able to recommend it not eligible for local landmark listing.
But you just stated in your presentation that this is among the best example of this firm's religious structures in Minneapolis. And then you stated that there isn't enough research yet on this topic. So I'm confused as to how we can be saying that there's not enough evidence to suggest a property worthy of designation when there doesn't seem to be enough evidence that the property is not worthy of designation. So I guess I'm questioning whether or not there's enough information in our packet to be able to concur with you. You said it's not the best example of the A-frame churches. We're not required to just nominate the best examples, are we?
Chair Bjornberg, Commissioner Howard, not the best example, a property that is emblematic. When I think to your comments, staff did understand kind of the struggle behind this as well.
I can tell from
it is
the
very
application,
difficult,
or from the report.
Correct.
Yeah.
It is an increasing field of study, even though it's been eligible for NRHP listing for a while now. Modern properties.
Yeah.
At the same time, because there are so many of these types of churches, and because staff is selecting which are worthy for landmark study, it is a lot to consider with the recommendation and the research that is put into that. So with the research we were able to uncover of the property, we did not believe that it reached the level of significance to be considered eligible for landmark status, especially when compared to other examples that do still exist in the city.
Okay, thank you.
Are there other questions for staff? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I will now open the public hearing for this item. Is the applicant here and would they like to speak? If so, please come to the microphone and state your name and address for the record.
My name is Sean Huckleby. I'm representing Richard Hutzel, the owner of Premier. Richard couldn't be with us. He has the flu, and we took a vote and told him to stay home. My address is 888 Charles Avenue in St. Paul, and I work with Richard as an advisor to him on both property management and property development. I'm here to primarily answer your questions if you have them regarding how we went about selecting this site. We were approached by the current tenants of the church back in the early 2020, and they were combining with another church because their congregation had gotten smaller and smaller, and the church could not really afford to maintain that property. We discussed what the development options would be, and they were concerned about what we would do in terms of integrating a project into the neighborhood. We at first had proposed the site to be an assisted living site, trying to make it as affordable as we possibly could, but then the pandemic occurred, and all housing production, as you well know, really dried up for a number of years until we were able to get back in the game in terms of development. As we looked at the site, the market had changed, and there was an increasing need for affordable family units in Minneapolis, and particularly on the north side of Minneapolis. We thought this was a strategic location because it was near the rapid transit lines. It was also near North Memorial Hospital, and we thought it could be workforce housing as well as affordable for the tenants who were there. Just a note that we recently have learned that the city of Minneapolis itself is condemning the building because of the conditions of the building. So I think the city right now feels that the building is unsafe and should be demolished. But in terms of broader questions that you may have regarding what we're proposing, we have our architect here, David Witt from MDA. We have Sarah Larson from Landon Associates, who's helped us put the package together for submission to Minnesota Housing, and it has been funded. And we have Chris Brogan here, who has been doing the community engagement for us. So I'm willing to answer any questions that you might have or bring somebody up here who could.
Thank you for that. Do commissioners have questions? Commissioner Howard.
Thank you. It does look like the perfect spot for some housing, and I'm very supportive of housing. I'm curious, I know it went through a section, or is going through a Section 106 review with the State Historic Preservation Office. Has that concluded?
As I believe it has not yet concluded.
Okay.
We
No.
did, I think there was an original one done. Is that right, sir? Come on up, sir.
That process has not started yet, so that was, it was just recently fully funded. So the funders get together, and that's, would be started in sometime in 2025.
Okay, thank you.
Do other commissioners have questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there are there any members of the public who wish to speak for or against this application? If so, please step forward and state your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Catherine Tamajan. I live at 3110 Vincent Avenue North, right across the street from the church. I don't speak before commissions very frequently, so I will be referring to my notes. I do have a couple things to say about the historical designation. So the report that was produced by the person who was speaking earlier indicated that there were other churches of this style available in the city that are still extant. There are none in North that I'm aware of. This appears to be the only building of this Gothic A-frame style that's still in existence. And there are a couple other mid-century churches in North that are still around, but again, they're not this style. And it does have very good integrity within the community. And in the absence of a comprehensive study, it doesn't seem like the best move to demolish a historical property like this until that comprehensive study has been completed. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Are there any others who wish to speak for or against this item? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Commissioners, let's discuss. Are there concerns or comments on the proposed application? Commissioner Howard.
You obviously all know that I have concerns about the application, and I'm sorry my questions may seem pretty pointed, but we have a historic context on modernism, and I think we should be using it. Of course, as I rewrite it, as I was looking at this, I said, well, that's not very helpful in making a decision under criterion 4 and 6. So my concern is that we have a property that is admittedly one of the best example of this firm's religious structures in Minneapolis, and it has integrity, and we're just saying it's not eligible for local designation without that context written, or at least not within the documentation that we were given today. We can, look at the list of additional churches that might be comparable, but it's a list of additional churches. I still don't know what makes them more significant than this. And should we be nominating something that is more significant than something else, or should we just be nominating something that's significant? So I have some troubles with this one.
you. Do other commissioners have comments? I'll say I don't know sort of like whether to be reassured that there's a 106 process that this project would have to go through or not, because I sort of do feel like if this is locally significant, that won't necessarily be caught or stopped by a Section 106 process. So I don't want to put too much weight in what that outcome will be. I do think it's a cute little building, but I don't know that I have much more to say than that. Do other commissioners have comments, thoughts? Commissioner Hare?
I do agree that the city does need more affordable housing. I'm just questioning if this site is the correct site for that development. Seemingly that the application is a little conflicted, and the Section 106 report has not been conducted. I do feel that it might be premature to grant the demolition permit for this property.
Thank you, Commissioner Hare. Commissioner Corrado.
Thank you. I think similarly, I think it's a nice building. The style is obviously significant. Now, some of it might be shaded by the popularity of the style of today. But also understanding that perhaps while there may be other similar structures in the city, if in that part of the city it's not present, perhaps it does have a significance to the neighborhood. Also understanding that different architecture firms may focus on different aspects of different types of buildings and typologies. If this is one of their better examples of church architecture, I think that's also something to be considered. So I think further study and understanding would be more helpful in making a decision.
Thank you, Commissioner Corrado. I will also say one of the things that I feel like I heard during the staff report, in the staff report, was sort of this, that the argument hadn't been made that demolition is necessary to correct a condition. And also heard a comment about sort of the city condemning the building. So I am also curious if there's a way to have more information on that, or sort of look into that to understand if that is, if demolition is necessary to correct a unsafe condition. Staff?
Thank you, Chair Bjornberg. I want to make a couple statements just on some of the discussion I'm hearing to make sure that just where everybody's staying in the correct lane of what is being discussed on the project. Just to keep in mind, Section 106 and the local process are independent of each other. Given that the statement from the applicant is that it has not started, so that is not something that should be considered. That would be something that's independent. And may or may not be coming later, depending on what what happens with any funding choices. The options before you are either, you can approve the demolition, you can deny the you can overturn staff recommendation with findings to deny the demolition, though keep in mind that does automatically kick off a designation study of it with interim protection for 12 months. The other option is you can continue the application and ask for more information is an option as well. Another topic I'm hearing that if you are interested in getting more information on, is that the demolition findings, are not just based on significance. There are other demolition findings, as you just noted, regarding unsafe condition, and then also reasonable alternatives, to which Rob had mentioned that, whether the property does have significance or not, it is something to consider in terms of whether or not it meets those demolition findings. So just a couple of blanket statements as you are deliberating this decision. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Do commissioners have thoughts, responses? Commissioner Booty?
Thank you, Chair Bjornberg. I personally would feel more comfortable making a decision if I had more information, specifically about the condemnation information that we received. It seems like that came after the staff report was completed, and I want to know how that affects the conditions that we would be evaluating on based on correcting unsafe.
Thank you.
Yeah. I kind of trailed off there. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I'm interested in understanding that better. It's helpful to understand that continuing is an option, and that those sort of other two pieces don't necessarily have to do with significance or integrity. I think that from my perspective, it seems like a designation study is a longer process. So. Other thoughts or comments from commissioners? Commissioner Corrado.
Yeah, I think likewise, I'm more inclined to go with a continuation and asking for more information about the condition of the structure. It would be nice to have more information about the architecture, but I don't know if that's a reasonable ask at that point.
Thank you. Commissioner Howard.
I don't know that I can support a continuation only because I'm not going to be here. No. I think a continuation makes sense for the information we just heard about it being currently condemned. It seems to me that there could be more information about the architecture than what we've been given in the current staff report. Obviously, staff has looked at comparables and has more information than necessarily what's written here. So there could be some additional there. But again, I won't be here, so I'll let you guys decide.
I appreciate that. That's a great point too, especially if it sounds like there has been a historic consultant engaged on this. Maybe they are able to provide additional information during that period. If somebody were to make a motion. Commissioner Howard.
I'm guessing that staff would need to know how long the continuation would be, and I don't know how far we are into the time frames required under ordinance. So that would be something we need to know to do a continuation.
Thank you, Commissioner Howard. Staff?
Chair Bjornberg and Commissioner Howard, I would defer to Rob Skalki on the 6120 timeline. Regarding condemnation, I can tell you what I know from a city perspective about what that means. I'm not the expert on this, so I'm going to be very just full disclosure and caveat there. It is not an order to demolish, though. From what I understand and experience of when buildings condemned is then it's more of an order to correct, in that it is to be repaired. I mean, not to be repaired, but there are, certain requirements that our staff in that city department and reg services says these need to happen in order to bring this to a usable state to be used again, or these are the corrections that need to be made, but it's not in order to demolish. And my understanding, at least at this point in time, unless maybe the applicant has more information, I know the public's hearing closed, so we can't ask that at this point. It's not my understanding that the building official has come in and said this building has to be demolished at this point. But, you know, from the statement of being condemned, there are clearly conditions issues that have been identified from the city at an official level. So, thank you.
Thank you for that. Rob, do you want to, can you speak to the continuation date question, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Bjornberg. Staff did send an extension letter to the applicant on December 3rd, given the date the application was deemed complete was October 9th. That means they do have more than 60 days for a decision. They have up to 120 days. That 120 decision date end period is February 6th. It's my understanding that if this would be continued and potentially whatever was decided at the next HPC meeting be appealed, it seems like it would be a pretty high probability that the appeal timeline would go over those 120 days. I'm not certain on that. I would have to double check. It may get very close, but I'm not entirely certain at this point.
Okay, so to clarify, that means that we cannot continue it? Staff.
Chair Bjornberg, I'm going to look up the timeline right now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Booty.
Thank you, Chair Bjornberg. I just wanted to clarify, you know, for the general consensus of what we're talking about to kind of, while they're looking that timeline up, the information that we would like to understand for a continuation would be, some of the more information about the specific conditions that led to that from the city's perspective, but also in terms of the architecture, understanding the, this is where I'm trying to like figure out the words to, the right ask, I guess, to potentially overturn the staff finding or continue. We're not overturning, or that's not what I'm trying to say, but you know what I'm getting at. In terms of the architecture, what kind of recommendations would people have for the information we would like to receive?
Thank you for that. And I appreciate you taking the time to try to clarify what we're asking for. I would say that I would add, not that I would be interested in not just understanding like what the city has referenced, but to again get just like more information on conditions, whether or not that's something that the city has called out or something that the owner is aware of. And I think that the applicant could work with staff to sort of fill in that information. In terms of the architectural history aspect, I'm hoping that maybe other commissioners will have comments on that. Commissioner Corrado?
Let me see if I can succinctly state this. I guess it's two-part. One is both the style and typology relative to the neighborhood context and how significant would it be perceived? Is this common? Is it completely uncommon? From what I'm gathered today, it seemed like it is a very unique condition, so that I think points to a significance. I think the second is relative to that particular architecture practice's work. Where does this sit within the timeline of the existence of the firm and potentially, therefore, the significance of that particular project to that firm?
Thank you. Staff?
Chair Bjornberg, with what I heard from Rob Skolecki is the 120 timeline is February 6th. This would track to the February 13th City Council meeting for a decision, should, including the possibility of an appeal. We are not going to make 120, so a decision has to be made tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Do commissioners have thoughts with that additional context in mind? So it sounds like our options are approving the motion or overturning with findings.
It
Commissioner
seems
Merrill.
that the consensus here is for more information, so unless we can get to a point where we consider that we don't need that information, then it should be approved.
Thank you. I will say that my understanding is that if we are overturning, that we will need a finding of why we disagree with staff recommendations. Commissioner Corrado?
And to clarify, that would start a designation study?
Correct. Commissioner Howard?
I started this whole problem. So I'll try to make a motion, and I'll look to staff to tell me if the finding is adequate. Notwithstanding staff recommendations, the church appears to embody the distinctive characteristics of an architectural style, the mid-century A-frame church, and retains sufficient integrity required to be considered for landmark designation under Criterion 4. It may also have significance under Criterion 6, as it exemplifies the work of the master architects and is among the best of the examples of the firm's religious structures in Minneapolis. We agree with CPED staff findings that the demolition is not necessary to correct an unsafe or dangerous condition, and that there are reasonable alternatives to demolition. Therefore, the Commission denies the demolition of historic resource application, establishes interim protection, and directs the planning director to prepare or cause to be prepared a designation study of the property.
Staff.
Chair Bjornberg, Commissioner Howard, I got most of that except for the beginning part. So I think if I'm hearing you, I'm going to try to spit it back, and then I have a comment to make about time. You're saying that you, notwithstanding staff recommendation, be sure to use those words. You are stating that the property has significance, local significance under Criterion 4 and Criterion 6. And then there's a bunch else about how findings, but I would focus and simplify just to make it very clear. I mean, significance is a finding in that you're saying, yep, it has significance, therefore you find that there are reasonable alternatives. Is that essentially what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm saying it has significance, but that also we don't meet those other two criteria that allows for demolitions of historic resources, because CPED staff findings have said that the demolition is not necessary to correct an unsafe or dangerous condition, and that there are reasonable alternatives. So I assumed we needed to make all three findings: significance, and then against those other two, demolition.
The finding itself, sorry, Chair Bjornberg and Commissioner Howard, the finding itself is whether there are reasonable alternatives. And so my understanding of how the finding reads, and you are not wrong, it is convoluted in how it's presented, right. Is that you are saying there are reasonable alternatives, which I understand staff has mentioned in the staff report, but under that you are saying there are reasonable alternatives because you believe the property has significance under these two criteria.
Right.
Does that make sense?
I think so.
Okay. I think that
This is why I look to you.
Yeah, that's okay. I think that is a reasonable finding because you're following that. make sure, as you make that to use the notwithstanding, but, and then the rest of the language you talked about regarding interim protection and so on. My comment real quick is that it is 6:10. We have to wrap up completely, adjourn by 6:30, and we have one other item tonight because our captioner is only here until 6:30. And so if we do not make a decision on the second item as well, we will have to continue that and could be into a 120 issue, but I would defer it to staff on that. So please note. Thank you.
Thank you.
So does that motion, do you have it?
I can work with staff to get.
Thank you, Commissioner Howard. Is there a second?
Hair seconds.
Commissioner, thank you, Commissioner Merrill. Any further discussion? Seeing none, would the clerk call the roll?
Commissioner Booty,
Aye.
Hare,
Aye.
Howard,
Aye.
Corrado,
Aye.
Maston,
Aye.
Merrill,
Aye.
Chair Bjornberg.
Aye.
There are 7 ayes.
Thank you. That motion passes. Our next item is item number 7, 2100 Stevens Avenue, Ward 10. This application is for a certificate of appropriateness. The staff report is presented by Aaron Kay.
Good afternoon, Chair Bjornberg and Commissioners. Might now be evening. My name is Erin Kay. I'm a Senior City Planner in the Historic Preservation subsection of the Department of Community Planning and Economic Development, or CPED. I'm here today to present a Certificate of Appropriateness application for the property located at 2100 Stevens Avenue in the Washburn Fair Oaks Historic District. I will try not to speed read too fast, but want to be mindful of time and make sure our applicant has a chance to speak as well. Here you can see the property's location. Here we have views of the front elevation, which faces east, and the north elevation. It was built in 1906 for Luther Farrington, an executive in a wholesale grocery firm. It was designed by prominent local architect William Channing Whitney and built by prominent builder Pike and Cook. It was built as a single-family home and is now owned by Boulder Options, a youth mentoring program. They use the building for offices and program activities. You are likely familiar with the significance of the Washburn Fair Oaks Historic District, so I am going to breeze past that. Primarily, it's significant for its associations with social history, neighborhood identity, landscape design, architecture, and work of a master architect. The period of significance is 1863 to 1939. The subject property is highly characteristic of the historic district's significance and is a strong example of the Georgian Revival style, as was detailed in the staff report. The applicant is proposing to replace 56 historic windows and 1 historic rear door within the existing openings. The applicant cites various issues with the windows, including broken sash cords, broken glass, rotted wood, insufficient ceiling, failing weather stripping, energy inefficiency, and presence of lead above the federal standard. The applicant has indicated that the existing storm windows do not seal tightly and are not performing well. It is not known when the current storm windows were installed. As shown in these photos, the windows are primarily 6/6 double-hung wood sash windows, with 3 exceptions, as I will note. On the north elevation, that bottom picture at the east or left end of the first story, there is a 3/3 double-hung wood sash window, which is one of the exceptions. Here we have views of the rear west and south elevations, which contain more of the same type of window. On the south elevation, that right photo, there is 1 small window in the center that is not proposed for replacement. And on the west elevation, there are 2 windows that are not 6/6 like the rest of them. On the first story, there is a 4/4 double-hung wood sash window. And just above it, there is an arch window that is operable. In addition to window replacement, the applicant proposes to replace the rear patio door. In this photo in the bottom right corner, the current wood door is at right, with the proposed door arrangement shown at left as an example of what will go into the existing opening. It will not end up in a double door situation. The historic door has 4 panels with 12 lights each. The proposed door will be wood and have 3 panels with 10 lights each to make sure the proportion is still square, and to make the door more usable according to the applicant. Although this is a historic door, because it is located on the rear and not visible from the public right-of-way, staff finds the proposed replacement to be compatible. Here are sample photos of some of the existing windows provided by the applicant. More were included in your packet, and the applicant has a couple photos they would like to share during their time. As you can see in some of the details, some of the weather stripping is peeling away, and some of the sash cords are broken. The applicant is proposing to replace all of the windows with windows of the same size, light division, and operation that have Fibrex composite exteriors and wood interiors. They will have interior and exterior muntins and an interstitial spacer. The applicant is not able to keep the arched window that is operable, so the replacement is proposed to be fixed. Staff focused our analysis on findings number 3 and number 4 regarding compliance with the design guidelines and the Secretary of the Interior standards. In staff's opinion, the historic windows are not severely deteriorated or beyond repair to address the issues identified by the applicant. However, the applicant provided a lead inspection report that indicates almost all of the windows and the door proposed for replacement exceed the federal standard. Although this is typical for houses built before the federal ban of lead-based paint in 1978, staff recognize that this poses a serious concern given that youth are often at the subject property. In this case, staff does consider total window replacement to be appropriate in order to mitigate the presence of lead. The proposed window design meets the guidelines and the standards. In terms of the material, Fibrex composite is considered compatible for this historic district based on the design guidelines. Staff recommends approval of this material for use on the side and rear elevations because they are less visible or not visible from the public right-of-way. However, because it is a different material from the original wood, in staff's opinion, this will result in a different profile. Therefore, staff recommends conditioning that the windows on the front east elevation shall be replaced with wood windows to be most compatible with the historic district. The proposed condition also allows for repair of the historic wood windows in lieu of replacement. As conditioned by staff, staff finds this project meets the design guidelines and the standards. Staff recommends that the Heritage Preservation Commission adopt staff findings and approve the certificate of appropriateness to replace 56 windows and 1 rear door for the property located at 2100 Stevens Avenue in the Washburn Fair Oaks Historic District, subject to the following condition. Number 1, the 19 windows on the front east elevation shall be repaired, especially for the purpose of lead abatement, or replaced in kind with windows that have wood exteriors and match the historic windows in size, profile, depth, configuration, glass color, and operation. Staff have received no public correspondence pertaining to this project. I understand there was a question about timing for this application. The application was deemed complete on November 20th, 2024. The 60-day decision period would end on January 19th, 2025, with the 120-day decision period ending on March 20th, 2025, should a 60-day extension letter be needed. I am happy to stay for questions. The applicant is also here and would like to make a presentation, assuming we still have time.
Thank you for that report. I have a question that I will just start with. So it sounds like you're conditioning it to retain the 19 windows on the front, which I'm assuming have similar lead levels. And the idea is that those can be abated. Can you talk me through your decision about only having those versus abating all of the windows?
Thank you, Chair Bjornberg. So I'm going to clarify the condition. We understand that replacement may be the best option, and so we would recommend allowing that, but we would like to see the front elevation have wood windows to be more consistent with what was there historically. We added repair as an option if that is feasible for the applicant to do that instead of doing replacement. We understand that repair to remove lead-based paint is not a small endeavor, and so that may not be an option for them. I will defer to the applicant to address that in their remarks.
Thank you. Do other commissioners have questions? Okay, thank you. I will now open the public hearing for this item, and I believe that the applicant is here. Please come to the microphone and state your name and address for the record.
My name is Nate Peterson. My address is 9000 West 28th Street in St. Louis Park. My name is Daryl Thompson. My address is 4220 Oakview Lane, Plymouth, Minnesota. I actually brought a sample of the window in case anybody would like to look at it. I wanted to make sure that everybody was clear on how we got to the point that we're in right now. My company, Renewal by Anderson, does an annual charitable contribution to the community that we serve. And this was decided at the beginning of 2024 that we were going to offer up an opportunity to holder options to have all the windows replaced at our cost. So this isn't a sales operation that we're running here. We're trying to donate some windows to the nonprofit organization as a way to help out. In looking at the pictures, it sounds like the main objection is visually it's going to be different viewed from the street. So that's why I brought the window to show you guys. In addition to that, I wanted to just pull up a couple of pictures that would, it's an augmented reality picture to show before and after. And it's my position that the windows will look more like what they originally looked, because currently there's a storm window over the top that is definitely different than the way that it was originally built. So I'm going to pull up those pictures quick. So the one on the left here is with our augmented reality picture, and the one on the right is the current with the storm window over the top. So you can see if you look at the frame, it's significantly thicker than the one on the left. And is it okay if I set the window right here? And there's this thing right here. The other thing to note, I think you already mentioned it, the levels of, or the unsafe levels of lead that are present currently, the 19 in the front, that wouldn't be addressed, which again, this is a youth mentoring center, so there's consistently kids in the building, and the levels of lead paint aren't addressed with the restriction. So I want to pass it to Daryl. He's works there. Hi, my name's Daryl. I'm president of Boulder Options, and we're excited about this opportunity. This is a donation to our organization. We wouldn't be able to do this in any other way. So our staff is back now. We're preparing for a holiday party on Thursday night, so we'll have youth in the building 1 or 2 times per week over the course of the year. So this is really big for us. So to get all the windows replaced and donated and safe, and to get rid of the lead would be an enormous contribution to our organization. So that piece I wanted to cover. Then also, just the fact that this is a complete donation to us. So I don't have any other comments. The fact that the lead, that we're a youth mentoring program, and that this would also save us a significant amount of money. We've talking about 20 to 30% savings on our energy cost over the course of a year as well. So it saves us money, it gets rid of the lead, and it makes the building much more safe for our youth to be in it, and for us to be in it. I'm in the building basically 5 days a week, so it makes it safer for everybody.
Thank you. Do commissioners have questions? Commissioner Corrado.
So am I understanding correctly, the 56 windows would be provided by Renewal, the 19 wood ones then not?
So my company doesn't provide wood windows. We only have a composite that has wood in it, but it's not a wood window. The 56 windows that we offered is the entirety of the project. The restriction was just on that front elevation for the 19. So we would, in this scenario, we would replace all the rest of the windows, and the 19 in the front would remain, which the concern there is when you try and repair a window that's 118 years old, give or take, if you try and repair that, the ability to put that back in is going to be extremely challenging. And then a lot of the ropes and pulleys and things like that are damaged. Some of the glass is damaged on the actual window itself. I'm not sure that can be repaired without complete replacement once you pull that window out. And being that it's a nonprofit organization, it's not really in the cards to replace 19 windows.
if we didn't get it, we just wouldn't replace the front. We would just have to leave the lead and the windows and the cracks and the broken sashes, all that would just stay. We wouldn't replace the other 19 windows if we don't get them.
Thank you. Staff has a comment, quick.
Chair Bjornberg, it is 6:25 and 47 seconds. We have to be adjourned by 6:30, not a second over, or else we are in violation of a court agreement.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
That's it.
I'm like, so, quick question for staff. If we end up continuing this item, we are able to reopen a public hearing and continue to ask the applicant questions, correct?
I would defer to Kendall. I think we keep the public hearing open, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, you would keep the public hearing open. You would continue the item to the January 7th meeting. We are doing fine on 120, and you can continue the meeting. But unfortunately, we do have to call adjourn by 6:30 and not a second over.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Commissioner Hare.
I motion to continue this article to the January 7th HPC meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner Hare. Is there a second?
Corrado seconds.
Thank you, Commissioner Corrado. Any further discussion? Would the clerk call the roll?
Commissioner Booty,
Aye.
Hare,
Aye.
Howard. Aye. Corrado,
Aye.
Maston.
Aye.
Merrill,
Aye.
Chair Bjornberg.
Aye.
There are 7 ayes.
Thank you. That motion passes. That concludes our public hearing items. That item will be continued to our next meeting, January 7th. Thank you so much. Announcements.
I will just give a very quick, brief, but very thank you to Commissioner Howard, Commissioner Merrill, and Commissioner Sandbolt for their years of service. I'm going to stop there. You guys have been awesome. All done. Thank you.
Put in a lot of time for that last one. Okay, with that, we have completed all items on the agenda for this meeting. There being no other business to come before and without objection, I will declare this meeting adjourned. The next regular meeting of the HPC is January 7th, 2025.